In 1965, a man by the name of Carl Disch vanished from a research station in Antarctica. This man walked into a blizzard and never came back. Antarctica claimed another life. But there is a disturbing level of mystery alongside this story. His footprints led for miles into the ice, and 6 years after he went missing, radio stations across Antarctica started receiving transmissions from him. So how's that possible? This is the full story. If the name Carl Disch sounds familiar, I talked about him briefly in a previous video about Antarctica and why you shouldn't go there, because you probably just shouldn't go to Antarctica. Namely, it's cold. And also, penguinos.
But one of them caught our eye. He would neither go towards the feeding grounds at the edge of the ice, nor towards the colony. Shortly afterwards, we saw him heading straight for the mountains, some 70 kilometers away. The doctor explained that even if we caught him and returned him to the colony, he would head right back for the mountains. But why?
I love that edit. It's very human. The indomitable human spirit infected that penguino. So anyways, now before we get fully into Carl Disch, I need you to understand where he was. Antarctica. It is the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth, and it basically, in a roundabout way, wants you to die. Where do you think the lowest temperature ever recorded on Earth was? For one, it was minus 128 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was recorded at Vostok Station in 1983 in Antarctica. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under a minute. It is quite cold. Antarctica is technically a desert. It has less annual precipitation than the Sahara, but instead of sand, you've got ice up to 3 miles thick. And beneath that ice are lakes that haven't seen sunlight in a million years. Might as well be a billion. To be honest, doesn't make a difference to me. And how do we even know that? It's been a million years since this lake saw sunlight. You don't know shit. You change your minds every 20 years, you I say that with the utmost respect, by the way. I love science, but, you know, things change. And if I'm saying it matter-of-factly, it's definitely not true. The winds in Antarctica can hit 200 miles per hour. Your compass will barely work because of the poles, you know, magnetic interference. And during the polar winter, you get months of complete and uninterrupted darkness, like that movie, 30 Days a Night. But I think 30 Days a Night takes place in the Arctic Circle. I don't know. It's a pretty good movie. I like it. Vampires are cool. They're really cool. What's the new one that just came out? With all them white people who sing bluegrass. I love that movie. I've seen it like 5 times already, but I can't remember what it's called. I remember everything about it except for the name of it. Shit. I love that movie, though. Another thing. Antarctica is more isolated than the International Space Station. If an astronaut has a medical emergency, they can be evacuated back to Earth in hours. But in Antarctica, if you're wintering over there and something goes wrong, let's say between the months of March and October, you're no planes can land, no ships can reach you, you are stucky. Okay, guys? You have to hope and pray that someone on base knows how to perform surgery or some kind of life-saving procedure, or has the, let's say, wisdom and guidance of a character like MacReady from the movie The Thing, which takes place in Antarctica, by the way, just in case there's a thing there, because that seems realistic as well. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't put it past them, okay? Those lakes, 1,000,000 years old, it's full of things. This is only partially a conspiracy video about Antarctica and partially a video about what it's like to work and disappear and die there. And the reality being that sometimes you will never find out what happened. Carl Robert Disch was a 25-year-old man from Monroe, Wisconsin, a small, cheesy town. He had a German-American family and graduated Monroe High School in 1957. He was an ionospheric physicist working for the National Bureau of Standards. That's right, guys. An ionospheric physicist. What the is that? Carl's job was studying something called forward scatter, which is basically how radio waves bounce off the ionosphere and travel around the curve of the Earth. That's right, the Earth is not flat. it has a curve. And during the 60s, this type of research was serious Cold War era research. It was a type of work that helped us communicate across continents without satellites, down or up and around, depending on if you want to go Antarctica way or you want to go the Arctic way. If you want to, one or the other, really. There's only two choices. And both will eventually reach, the top one's closer to Russia, which was our main bad guy, obviously, in the Cold War. C'est the enemy. Carl was part of something called the Year of the Quiet Sun program, which is an international effort to study the atmosphere during a period of low solar activity, which is fairly rare nowadays, it seems. But when we have a period of low solar activity, there is a lot to learn from the atmosphere. The people who worked with Carl described him as one of the most brilliant scientists ever to visit Antarctica, and in late 1964, Carl shipped out to Byrd Station for a winter-over assignment, and with that, he knew exactly what he was signing up for. He was a smart guy. Byrd Station, maybe that rings a bell. It's named after Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a famous polar explorer who went to Antarctica, saw a bunch of long, blonde-haired, white alien people in the middle of the earth who were also Nazis. That's a true story. They looked like this. No, not like that. Like this. During that winter in which Carl was wintering over, a winter over, by the way, is when you go to Antarctica and you stay the winter over. There were only 29 people on the station, 19 Navy personnel, 8 scientists, and 1 dog, which was a husky named Sastrugus, but everyone on the station called him Gus, because it's a cute little name for a cute husky dog. Also, this sounds just like the beginning of the thing. I mean, that's like the first thing. The second thing is kind of bullshit, but it's like a continuation of the beginning of the prequel. Anyways, Carl worked at the radio noise building, which was about 7,000 feet from the main station complex, which is just over a mile through the ice. That's 1.46 miles. 4-1. I don't know. Mostly in winter over conditions, you don't navigate by sight. You can't see anything. You have these things called hand lines that are strung between buildings. It's a literal rope that you can grab and follow to get from one place to another. Carl had made the walk between the stations more than 25 times that season. Same route, same rope, no problem. All right, guy? Come on now. May 8th, 1965. Spoiler alert, problems, 9:15 in the morning. Morning, it doesn't really mean a lot when there's not much of a sun going on. But Carl left the radio noise building to head back to the main station. Temperature at the time was minus 45 degrees Fahrenheit with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, potentially higher. Now, I just heard you ask me to your very large television set and or mobile phone, because those are the two primary ways in which people watch my videos. What about visibility? Well, family sitting in their living room or single adult man sitting on the toilet, 0! Almost nothing! During this trek, for some reason, Carl did not grab the hand line, and by 10 a.m., he hadn't arrived at the main station, and that walk shouldn't have taken more than 20 minutes. It should have been less than 20 minutes. People started searching, and at 11:30, they found his footprints. But the tracks weren't heading towards the main station. They were heading west towards the skiway, which is the wrong direction entirely. And the detail that confuses me most and really gets my boat floating, I guess, and not a weird, horny way, but rather in a very interesting conspiracy way, his footprints showed no shortening of stride, which means he wasn't disoriented, or most likely was not disoriented. When people get lost or disoriented, they stumble and they wander and their steps become erratic. There's a clear change in gait. It correlates with your panic, essentially. Carl's footprints were deliberate. He was walking with purpose, and he knew exactly where he was going. They followed his tracks for about 4 miles before drifting snow covered them completely. They found a second set of tracks heading south, followed those for miles as well, and still, like the others, found nothing. A fellow by the name of Jim Bartley was there that winter, and he described the search. He said, "We tried in vain to find Carl, but at the time the wind was raging with minus 45 temperature. All we could do was tie ropes around our waists and spread out on both sides of the D8 cat and walk along, hoping to stumble over him." Their assumption was that he was dead and frozen. By the way, there's a turkey at my parents' farm who, over the weekend, froze to death because it was so cold. He tried roosting, died. Jim compared the search to the classic old-timey adage of, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. The temperature dropped to minus 79. They searched for days, they fired flares, they formed human chains, and they checked the old bird station 6 miles away, found nothing. On May 14, 1965, they called off the search, and Carl Disch was presumed dead. A memorial service was held back in Monroe, Wisconsin, and his family buried an empty casket. And that should have been the end of the story, right? Brilliant young scientist, hostile environment, tragic accident. Wrong! One thing. He made that walk 25 times before, actually a few things. He walked away from safety for miles until his tracks completely stopped. Why? Okay. We'll start with the obvious explanations. Maybe he was just disoriented. Minus 45 degrees, 30-mile-an-hour winds, total darkness. That's enough to confuse a guy like me. All right. You lose your bearings, you start crying, you walk the wrong way, hypothermia sets in, and it's over. But he had done this walk 25 times before. He knew exactly where the handline was, and his footprints weren't stumbling or erratic. They were deliberate, purposeful strides heading in a specific direction. Maybe he fell into a crevasse. Antarctica is riddled with crevasses. There are cracks in the ice that can be hundreds of feet deep that are often covered by thin bridges of snow, and they look solid until you step on them and shoo, right into a crevasse. That could explain why they never found his body, but they searched the area extensively and tracks did not end at a crevasse. They just ended on flat ground. They just stopped. Snow covered them up maybe, or he vanished mid-step, or who knows? So maybe it wasn't an accident, and that would imply something happened to Carl Disch's mind. There's a condition called winter over syndrome, which I talked a lot about in the previous Antarctica video, but I'll briefly go over it for the sake of this story. Winter over syndrome is like when your Sims in The Sims 2, 3, or 4 get the stir crazy moodlet. It's bad. It's really, really, really bad. Winter over affects people who spend the Antarctic winter in complete isolation. 7 or 8 months cut off from the rest of the world, and most of it spent in total darkness. Symptoms include depression, irritability, difficulty concentrating, insomnia, and something called the Antarctic stare, which is a kind of fugue state where people just zone out for long periods of time. It's what Walter White claimed to have in Breaking Bad, to get his bitch wife off his back about the whole meth empire bullshit.
Walt, please just hear me out, please.
This video is sponsored by Mint Mobile. We run Mint on our set phone for the Too Late Show, and it's what we use when we're calling customers for Sour Boys. So our Mint Mobile phone is getting real everyday use, not just sitting around as my crime phone. Mint is a premium wireless service without the premium wireless price tag. Right now, for a limited time, Mint is offering 50% off their unlimited wireless plans. This means you can lock in just $15 a month when you buy a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. Plus, setup was way easier than I expected. I activated the eSIM in this phone in minutes. Also, the service itself has been solid. Mint runs on the nation's largest 5G network, covers 98% of Americans, and every plan includes unlimited talk and text free calling Mexico, Canada, and the United Kingdom with a hotspot included. We use this, and so should you. Get this new customer offer and pay just $15 a month for a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. That's 50% off an unlimited wireless plan at mintmobile.com/oompa. That is mintmobile.com/oompa. Thank you to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this video. About 60% of winter over crews experience some level of symptom of winter over syndrome, and about 5% need psychiatric intervention. And in the mid-60s, this was not a new concept. Scientists had been documenting winter over syndrome since the 1950s. They had been aware of some level of insanity, stir craziness that comes with the isolation all the way back to the late 1800s. The first expedition to winter in Antarctica was the Belgica ship in 1897. That ship got trapped in pack ice, and them motherfuckers were stuck there for over a year. That sounds so bad. That's like nothing really sounds as bad as that. That would be, you're just on a ship. It's the 1800s. Things already suck. Life already blows shit and ballsack everywhere. And you're just on a ship. We've run the ground. And the captain's like, we're going to be here for a while, guys. We got to wait for the ice to melt. Little did they know, that ice hasn't melted in a million years. Just kidding. Pack ice. It's different, but still scary. And for that initial expedition, a doctor on board, Frederick Cook, watched his crewmates deteriorate Over 2 months of complete darkness, it drove some of them to, quote, despair and lethargy. A few of them temporarily lost their sanity, and Cook had to get creative to save them. He made them stand naked in front of fires because he noticed it improved their mood, which is actually considered the first medical application of light therapy, which is now a pretty luminance biomodulation. We're all over it nowadays, all right? This guy was like Dr. Huberman, but in 1897. Anyways, the point is Antarctica breaks people, and it has for a very long time. And there is evidence it was breaking Carl. Multiple sources say that Carl was acting strange in the weeks before he disappeared. One of the first flights back to Bird Station after that winter carried a loadmaster named Charlie. He said the winter over guys told him straight up that he was acting really strange for weeks before he walked out. He was taking aimless strolls, he was muttering incoherently, and he refused to engage with his colleagues on occasion. So that's tragic, obviously. Then there is the Frank Reckley story. Frank was another scientist who worked at the station, and he worked the same night shift as Carl at the radio noise building. And according to someone who later worked directly with Reckley, he was, quote, a really nice guy, but one of the most boring people I've ever met. The story goes that Reckley had a habit of talking endlessly about nothing. Hey man, does it sound familiar? It's kind of my whole shtick. And Carl, who was stuck working alongside him for months in the darkness, was slowly losing his mind from the monotony. So the implication here is that Carl just got fed up with Reckley yapping. One person described this as Reckley literally boring a coworker to death, which is just so mean, bro. It's so mean, dude. I feel like I don't know anybody who's ever done that. I have to be the one. I have to be that guy. I have to be the guy who just talks and talks and talks, and everybody's like, yeah. Because everybody who's around me, I pay them. I pay them all. They're all my employees. All my friends are all my employees. I can't have that. I can't have that. I can't have that. Maybe I'm just... Maybe I'm not the main character. Maybe I'm just a big teat to suck up. Now I'm making this about me. So that's a pretty funny theory, very disrespectful to both Carl and Frank, to be honest. And it seems kind of unlikely. I've got to say, the boringness of talking is probably better than the boringness of isolation and darkness. I assume. I'm not really totally sure on that. Is it what happened? Probably not, but it does sort of help paint the picture. Then there was a card game. A researcher named John Katsufrakis reportedly said that Carl's disappearance was triggered by a card game during the winter. Apparently, Carl had accused someone of cheating, or at least not treating him fairly in the game. He threw his cards down and announced that he was going to visit his friends at Pole. The South Pole Station was hundreds of miles away. You can't just walk to the South Pole Station. But Carl said it, got up, left, disappeared into the Antarctica winter. All right, they never saw him again. And 3 months after Carl vanished, the station dog Gus vanished too, that adorable husky that was probably a thing. I mean, let's be real. That's how it works in the Thing movie, which is how I base everything that I know about Antarctica off of that. I mean, look at this. McCready's right here with me, standing beside me. His wisdom and his guidance, they I trust him. Some of the guys at the station during this time reported seeing strange lights and hearing what sounded like a vehicle around the time that Gus had disappeared. 2 souls vanished from Bird Station that winter. The scientist and the dog, neither one was ever found. But also the dog comes back later. So Carl Disch's disappearance has shown up in some fairly expected, I guess, but unexpected, bizarre places. There's a former police officer named David Paulides who writes books about strange disappearances, cases where people vanish under unusual, bizarre circumstances and are never found. He calls the series Missing 411. You've probably heard about it on the internet. Mr. Ballin, myself, my wife, everybody's talked about it who talks about this type of thing. David Paulides specifically mentions the Disch case, and Carl fits what David calls the profile. That is, German heritage, high intelligence, and tracks that end abruptly. That's like the Missing 411 thing. Aside from specifically the German heritage and the high intelligence, the holy relic has fallen. Sorry. That was stupid. I apologize. Yeah, apparently that's part of the conspiracy, though, is being of German descent, having high intelligence, and your tracks just going missing in national parks. That's what happened to Carl Disch. Just being a regular person in America for a long time meant you were all those things, except for the tracks going missing. It's interesting, though, that Carl's case keeps getting pulled into discussions about unexplained conspiratorial disappearances. Then there is the Cold War angle. 1965 was the height of the Cold War, and Antarctic research stations from different countries were scattered across the continent. And it is no secret that some of them were used for more than just science. The theory goes that Carl was a Soviet spy who was extracted by agents, and these strange lights people reported were actually Soviet aircraft or vehicles, Soviet UFOs. All right, motherfucker. That's what happened in Roswell. They took a drone, a little cuboid drone, cuboid squamous, stuffed it full of manipulated carcasses to cause hysteria. All right? All right, okay. Yeah, I think that's what happened. Not really. I think it was aliens. Anyways, is there any evidence for the Soviet theory? No. The nearest Soviet station, 1,400 miles away. But the rumors persist. Then another conspiracy-adjacent theory is the station name, which I talked a little bit about that. All right, guys. Remember those long hair? Remember this guy? Yeah. Byrd Station was named after Admiral Richard E. Byrd, one of the most famous polar explorers in history. Byrd led Operation High Jump, 1946-1947, which was the largest Antarctic expedition ever mounted. 4,700 men, 33 aircraft, 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier and a submarine, all going to Antarctica. Officially, it was a training mission, but Byrd is also at the center of some of Antarctica's strangest conspiracy theories. There is an alleged secret diary that surfaced after his death claiming he encountered UFOs and an advanced civilization living inside the hollow earth. A bunch of that look like that? No, I can't keep doing that. Now, this has been thoroughly debunked if you're a hater, okay? The diary was published by a guy who turned out to be a disgraced pseudoscientist, and the Byrd Polar Research Center says there's no record supporting any of these claims. So it seems to be probably most likely complete and total nonsense, but it is fun to believe a little bit, maybe posit. It's fun to posit, like the apple in the head. Everyone with me now, imagine an apple. Now imagine the apple has long, flowing blonde hair and is covered with Nazi symbols. And he's in a hollow earth on the inside, and he says, "Don't use nuclear bombs, I'm a Nazi." Or whatever It is a really insane theory, but it's a funny one. I mean, I've got to be real, it's quite hilarious. All that aside, the fact remains, Carl Disch vanished from a station named after the man at the center of one of the biggest conspiracy theories ever, and the biggest of Antarctica. Okay, guys, back to the strange lights. Declassified documents show that there were UFO sightings across Antarctica in the early 1960s. In July 1962, Hullet Station reported a bright light that traveled across the sky from south to north, then hovered and flashed. There were similar sightings at other bases around the same time period. And during the search for Carl Disch, multiple people reported unusual lights in the distance and strange sounds that they could not identify. Scientists say most of these can be explained by atmospheric phenomena, auroras, ice crystals, temperature inversions, but the reports exist, and they are real, and they're right here on the screen. Thank you, Tara. She has just like a direct line right to declassified reports about UFOs, I think. She's so good at putting them in there. She's awesome. All right, guys. Let's get a few smash likes for Tara. So where does that leave us? A brilliant young scientist walks away from safety in the middle of a blizzard. His footprints are deliberate and purposeful. They lead for miles, then they just stop. He had been acting strange for weeks. Maybe the isolation was getting to him. Maybe he Snappenheimered. Maybe it was something entirely different. The dog vanishes 3 months later. Strange lights are reported both times. He fits the profile of unexplained disappearances, and he vanished from a station named after a man surrounded by conspiracy theories. For 6 years, that's where the story sat. Unsolved, unexplained, another victim of the ice. Until the winter of 1971. 6 years after Carl Disch walked into the ice and never came back, the radio operators at McMurdo Station started receiving strange transmissions. McMurdo Station, that's the station that Windows tries to get contact with after the Norwegians shoot everything US up. The thing. All right, guys?
US number 31 calling McMurdo. Urgent. Come in. Over. Great.
So, the radio operators at McMurdo started receiving some bizarre transmissions. The transmissions came through the AA2 weather circuit, which is the system that Antarctic stations use to relay messages across the continent. There's Russian stations, French stations, Argentine stations. They'd pick up transmissions and pass it along to McMurdo. And the messages all had the same header: CQ, CQ, DE, NBN, NBN, QSP, NGD, NGD. In radio shorthand, that translates to, any station, this is Brockton Station, pass this message to McMurdo Station. The sender identified himself as Carl Disch. Now, I'm going to read some of these messages, and they're insane. They're not paraphrased. These are the actual words that came through the radio. The first message said, I am Carl Disch. To the world, I am dead. They believe that my body is but a pinpoint frozen hard to the surface of this white continent. I say to you, I, Carl Disch, live. The message continued. Do not for one moment think that it was a mistake. Everything was planned. They pushed me, tormented me, and bored me with their shallow lives. I left them behind, disowning the race called humans. The messages kept coming week after week. They were published in the station newsletter, which was a little paper called the McMurdo Sometimes, which is a hilarious name. People passed them around, read them aloud, and tried to figure what the was going on, to be honest. Another message read, on a bleak Saturday night 6 years ago, I walked out the door of Longwire Station. I never returned. They searched for me as I knew they would, following my straight and deliberate steps for several miles. They never found me, and not one of them realized that they had been tricked. And if we remember, his footprints were in fact deliberate, and they did in fact go for miles. So whoever wrote this knew some details of the search, and they knew the mystery surrounding it. And whoever wrote it, or if it was Carl Disch, they gave the tone of the messages this narcissistic, almost megalomaniacal, I'm better than you sort of virtue signaling weird vibe. It's really strange. It's like an alien wrote it, seriously. One of the messages even said, I, Carl Disch, the most alone man in the world. Another, I am a genius. In the early recollections of my childhood, I was aware that I was exceptional. They sensed it too. And because of it, they were afraid of me. There was even a backstory. The messages claimed Carl had been orphaned as a baby and that his parents were killed in a Nebraska tornado when he was barely a year old. Then he was adopted by an elderly couple with the surname Disch. The message says, we'll call him Carl Disch, she said with great enthusiasm. The agony had begun. Now, we don't know if that's true. Couldn't find any records to confirm or deny it, but someone wrote it and someone transmitted it across Antarctica, claiming for it to come from a dead man. That's real. But was he an orphaned baby child? I don't really know about orphaned baby childs. It gets stranger, unfortunately, guys. The radio operators at McMurdo contacted the foreign stations that had relayed the messages. The Russian station, the French station, the Argentine station, and they all confirmed the originating call sign was NBN, which is Brockton. There's just one problem. Brockton Station was a summer-only facility, a weather station and fuel pit about 300 miles from McMurdo out in the middle of the Ross ice shelf. It operated from October to February, and the rest of the year it was completely vacant, not a human being. All right, guys? No personnel, no power, no nothing. And these messages came during winter, which is not summer. So if someone was transmitting from Brockton Station in the middle of the Antarctic winter, they would have been alone in one of the most remote places on Earth with no official support, in complete darkness, and in temperatures that would kill an unprotected person in minute. All right? For months. They were sending weekly messages claiming to be a scientist who died 6 years earlier. Then also the dog. Remember the dog, Gus Strastrugus? Whatever the his name was? The station husky who disappeared 3 months after Carl. One of the messages talked about the dog. It claimed that Carl, or whoever was writing this, had lured Gus away from the station using, quote, cans of smoked oysters marinated in Fanny's secret barbecue sauce and skua gizzards pickled in fermented beetroot juice. That's some wildly specific insanity. So whoever wrote these messages knew the dog had disappeared, they knew the timeline, they knew the details that only someone at the stations would know, and the messages kept coming for months. Then around Windfly, which are the first flights back to Antarctica after the winter isolation ends, after that they just stopped. No explanation, no final transmission, they stopped. And to this day, nobody knows who sent them, if they were real. The official position is that it was an elaborate hoax. Someone with clear knowledge of the radio and a very dark sense of humor decided to mess with people's heads in Antarctica, which is crazy, but also epic. No one ever came forward, no one ever claimed responsibility, and whoever did it had access to details about Carl's disappearance that were not widely known. But that's also not the end of it still, because between the time in which he disappeared and the time in which the messages were transmitted, people were seeing Carl. For 3 years after Carl disappeared, rumors spread across Antarctica, across the 50 people there. Researchers at different stations, hundreds of miles apart, reported seeing a ghost-like figure, a man traveling with a dog in places where no one should be. Then, for the next 3 years after that, the sightings changed. The man was seen alone with no dog, and sometimes people said they would hear him calling out into the wind, Gus, Gus, Gus. That seems like a bullshit campfire ghost story, to be honest, but I like it. Now, researching this video, I found 2 specific accounts from the Erebus Club, that was the bar at McMurdo Station, both of them documented in emails shared among Antarctic veterans. The first one happened sometime between October 1978 and February 1979. Many years after Carl went missing and many years after the radio transmissions. A fellow was working as the club manager. It was his first summer on the ice, and one night after closing, he was alone in the club counting the money. He had his back to the room working at the safe when he felt someone or something behind him. He turned around and there was an old man standing at the end of the bar. The man was dressed in old gray cold weather gear, and he had a white beard and white hair, just standing there looking at him. The manager turned back to the safe for a second, and just a second, when he looked back, the man was gone. He searched the entire club, checked the doors. There was no way anyone could have gotten in or out that fast, and the place was completely empty. And he said, quote, "I'm certain today, as I was then, I had seen a man standing at the end of the bar." And when he told people what had happened, a guy named Billy Ace told him, "You saw Carl Disch." And this guy became known as the guy who saw the ghost in the Erebus. The second account is from a different witness in a different year. This person was also closing up the club, the Erebus. He was alone, taking the money out of the register. They sent someone in the room, turned around, boom. They saw a man and a dog. Same as the first one, turned back to put the money away, turned back, gone. The completely real witness said, quote, "Really spooky. It scared the shit out of me, but I know I saw someone. A man and a dog. They seen a man and a dog. Then just a man calling for a dog. Then sightings at the bar. First a man alone, then a man with his dog." These accounts came from researchers, scientists, military personnel, people who worked in Antarctica, not really people who nowadays, they're not ghost hunters really. But then again, yeah, they're officials. I believe them. So, very bizarre story regardless. I totally glossed over it in the first video. I regret that. But now we've got this. More of a deep dive, more of an exploration into this Antarctica rabbit hole, guys. So what exactly do we do with a story like this? 25-year-old scientist walks away from safety into the Antarctic winter. His footprints lead for miles, deliberate, purposeful. They just stop. 3 months later, the dog vanishes. 6 years of silence. Then radio messages start arriving from a vacant station in the middle of winter, written in the voice of a dead man, claiming he planned the whole thing, claiming he lured the dog away, and claiming that he's a alien with beautiful, long, blonde hair. He disowned the race called humans. The messages stopped just as suddenly as they started. No one ever comes forward. For decades later, people keep seeing him. There's a man in old gray gear, sometimes with a dog, sometimes alone, calling out a name. There's a place in Antarctica now called Disk Promontory. It is an ice-covered ridge about 6 miles long in the Queen Elizabeth Range. They named it after Carl. And Carl Disch was the only fatality the Central Radio Propagation Laboratory ever suffered in all of their years of Antarctic research. His family buried an empty casket in Wisconsin. His body was never found. I have no idea what happened to Carl Disch. Maybe he had a mental break and walked into the ice to die. Maybe someone extracted him to Russia and the messages were some kind of strange cover story. Maybe something stranger happened. I have no idea. It was a long time ago. If you made it this far, I would genuinely like to know what you guys think. Leave a comment. Is it a hoax, a mental break, something else entirely? I'll see you all in the next video.